That one I like so much better, right?
Instead of a man needing no introduction, I get two or three.
Right. I'm like, no, that's not the one I wanted. That's not the one that's gonna work for us. So as we allow people to come on, and know that as for the presenters, I also let them know that a lot of times, a lot of people watching replay. I don't know if I shared that with you, but very excited to be here. I've tested everything. We are streaming. We give people time to come on. And while we do that, I'd just like to really welcome everyone to Sipping Tea with Sabrina. And in just a second, we will be sharing the tea on startup help for nonprofits. But if you never met me before, I'm Sabrina. I'm the founder of Supporting World Hope, a nonprofit consulting company. I started after 25 years in the industry, and we have with us today Sean Kosofsky. Sean, did I say your name right?
Pretty close. Kosofsky.
Oh, say it again for me.
Kosofsky.
Oh, I wasn't too bad, but I do like to honor people's name and get them right. But Shawn is known as the nonprofit fixer, and he's the owner of the Mind the Gap Consulting. So I'm really excited about this conversation because so many of you in this group are new startup nonprofits. And again, you're in shock and you don't know where to begin. And there's so much information out there, but you feel overwhelmed and your things to do list is growing and you don't know where to focus. And so today, with the help of Shawn, we're going to try to get you there. But before we get started, if you can click the heart or the like button, if you can hear me loud and clear, that will help us know that you are here and you're being engaged. And if you could let us know where you're watching from, even if you're watching in rebroadcast, because this is going to help us with our Facebook algorithms. And I really, really, truly believe that this is going to benefit you in the best way. So, Shawn, let's get started here. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your experience?
Sure. Sort of a lifer in nonprofits. I have been in nonprofits now for a little over 29 years. I got started very young when I was 16, working at the YMCA in Metro Detroit, and sort of evolved from there into clean water work for an environmental organization. Then eventually went to work in LGBTQ work as I came out of the closet after high school. I sort of wanted to commit my life to service and ran an LGBTQ youth group, then fell into a role at the statewide civil rights organization and did lobbying for gay and lesbian, trans and bisexual rights for 12 years. Moved to North Carolina, did work around women's reproductive health, and then also voting rights and voter engagement work, and then bullying prevention for years. But the theme throughout my entire nonprofit career, and now I'm running a national climate change nonprofit from New York, and I have my own business, of course, but the theme throughout all of that in my life has been really wanting to work for people or causes that are sort of like struggling in silence. You know, a lot of LGBTQ people can't speak for themselves. A lot of women struggling with unwanted pregnancies don't feel like they have a voice. And also the environment can't really speak for itself, right? So that's sort of where I dedicated my life to environmental and social justice causes. And I live in New York with my husband, Travis, and our dog, Harry. And I love them both.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So I am excited, Shawn, because we have people that are jumping on and they're excited. Andrea, of course, who I talk about a lot. You have Chambers, you have KC. So we have people that are coming on and they are new to this. And you, my friend, having been doing this since you were 16 in some form of capacity, have a lot of experience. And so what we would like to do is use our time wisely and delve into your knowledge. Having done startups, having worked with established nonprofits, and now also running your company. So you have a lot of different perspectives to bring to the table. So with that, the first question is, I got my 501c3. What do I focus on first for a startup nonprofit?
Well, I definitely think that an organization needs to focus on a couple really key areas for them not to have the heartburn and the struggle and the stress and the burnout that a lot of other nonprofits end up having. And that is building a really solid board. So you definitely want to get a bunch of people that are committed and that you are clear with them up front about what is expected of them. So you want to get a board that is diverse by race, skill set, geography. You want a board that is committed to participating and isn't going to just push all the work to the staff, that they're going to do some work. You don't set this lowest common denominator for board service, and getting a board agreement that codifies all of that early on. And then the other thing is just really getting clear about your messaging. Like, what is your unique value proposition? I'm going to give away a free thing today for folks about how to craft your own unique value proposition as a nonprofit. But I really think that the messaging, who we are, what it is we do, like why you should care, getting that messaging down about how you fundraise and building the board and getting those key systems in place are all essential. By the time you've actually created your 501c3, you already have the bylaws, the articles of incorporation, probably even meetings set up and stuff like that. So that's the mechanics. But those other things I mentioned are really critical because a lot of organizations don't do them and they are suffering long term because they didn't set up the board right from the beginning.
I 100% agree. I think that the board is the foundation in which everything is built. So welcome, Jess, to the broadcast. So with that in mind, how it leads into the next question, because I believe that the board is the foundation and then the fundraising comes and the marketing comes. But how do nonprofit startups get funding?
The numbers out there aren't very promising, right? I mean, there's like 1.5 million nonprofits out there. The vast majority of them are under $600,000 in budget. Most nonprofits think of fundraising as an afterthought. They really just think, oh, we have a bunch of well-intentioned people here. We'll get our tax status and money will just come, or we'll just apply. And people really do think that if you just send a request into a foundation, you get the money. Like there isn't some kind of like, no, that's coming your way, right? And God bless them.
Yes, God bless them. I realize that people have that, and yeah. I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a lobbyist and, for social justice causes. And people used to think that when you introduced a piece of legislation, it just came up like in order, like an assembly line, like every bill gets a hearing. And it's like, no. There's like thousands of bills, like 20 are going to be heard. You have to fight like heck to actually get your policy passed, right? So in fundraising, people will get this 501c3 and they'll just forget to do all those different components, right? So I do think that, making sure that, I'm forgetting now what the question was.
So funding for startup nonprofits.
You get the first set. So if you're lucky enough to start with seed funding, you are incredibly lucky. That's very, very rare. It tends to happen when a wealthier person has a pet cause, right? So maybe it's like, I'm the CEO of a big company and I want to set up a foundation that's going to execute X. I will put all my own money or the company's money into this new thing. And there's no public support. It's just one donor, right? So that's not the case for most people. Or someone inherits something, or they come into some resources and decide, I'm going to retire and I'm going to put some money into this pet cause I have. It tends to be very local or tends to be very laser focused on one disease or one, cause, or remembering their child who they lost in some kind of horrible accident, like these very specific situations where someone puts a dedicated pot of money in. But for most nonprofits and for most organizations, you have to go out and ask for it. You have to go out and raise it. And that means using a variety of tasks at your disposal. You need an audience, you need a list, and that list could be online, that list could be from your emails, that list could be from a stage, that you need an audience, some kind of group of people that you can talk to. If you don't have a place where you can kind of broadcast your message out to lots of people, in a wide variety of ways, then you're going to have to go like individual by individual and build that base. Sometimes those are individual donors. Sometimes you can use the Facebook fundraising platform, which I'm really bullish on because you need almost nothing and all the fundraising is free. And so I'm a big believer that you can do that after you have your tax exempt status. But you will need to identify some foundations or companies, and you'll have to start asking your stakeholders to put in names into what will begin growing into a list that belongs to the organization that you can cultivate and grow forever.
And so how do you feel about board giving as leeway for startup funding?
I'm a white middle-class guy, and so I've always had one particular perspective on this. And in recent years, I've come to realize that there are some exceptions to the way I've thought about this, right? There are organizations that have formed in this country that, and this is a very tiny percentage of them, but I do want to signal that this is the case so that people don't think I'm aloof to this. There are some organizations that are made up specifically of poor people who are like, we don't have the resources and we are not putting this thing together so that we have to fundraise. We are creating this tax status as a vehicle to accomplish something great because we know we need to go out and ask others to actually help, right? Could be immigrants, could be refugees, could be people who create something right after a crisis. So there are some situations where folks by design deliberately do not have the financial resources to be giving, right? And in those limited situations, which tend to be the most disadvantaged folks in our society, I believe that expectations around fundraising are not necessarily the same. But 98% of nonprofits that are not foundations follow the model that I've been saying forever, which is I think board members do need to give and they need to get. They need to give it, put something meaningful. Whatever meaningful is to you. If $50 is meaningful to you, then that's it. If 5,000 is meaningful to you, then that's what you can do. So every board member should give something. Foundations will expect that your board members are pitching in. If they ask you, do you have 100% giving at your board and you don't, you'll have to explain that. It will put you at a disadvantage. But then also board members should go out and raise some money. And the difference between a normal volunteer and a board member is that resource procurement, right? Your governing and your resource procurement. So the board owns the nonprofit. And nonprofits are corporations. We are not-for-profit corporations, and the board owns the corporation. And all owners of all corporations are responsible for revenue, period. That's law. And so if you're not resourcing, the budget you just passed, if I just said, we're going to raise and spend $1 million, and you only show up for the spending of it, but you don't show up for the raising of it, you've abdicated your responsibilities as a governor of this corporation. So I don't think we talk to nonprofits about that clearly enough. The board owns the corporation. All owners are responsible for revenue.
Yep, I 100% agree. And so with the board being so important, where does new nonprofit find board members?
So there's two different, just to keep things simple, there's two different ways to go about this. You can do the slow, methodical, strategic way, or you can do the fast and furious sort of way, right? If you are in a hurry and let's say 5-year board members and you only have 6, all resign, right? And under your bylaws, you don't even exist. I have literally been in nonprofits where the whole board resigns at once because they're like, oh, it's a new day, it's new leadership. I'm not really good at fundraising. And independently, like 5 of the 7 board members decided at the end of their terms to just go. And I'm like, no, that's not how that worked. But I needed to grab a bunch of board members all in one time, right? So those are not ideal situations, but the fast and furious model, if you're in trouble or you're in a hurry, or you should not be in a hurry, but if you are in a hurry, you can look around your immediate universe of people and be guided by some kind of strategy, but you can just literally go out to them and ask people people that you know are interested in the success of this nonprofit, if they are willing to join. You still need to have the same high standards. You need to say, hey, we need you to attend 12 meetings a year. We need you to ask tough questions, avoid conflicts of interest, and we need you to raise $3,000 a year, right? But I do need you, and I need you to fill this particular role. So the fast and furious one can come into play when you are really in need. Most of us should be doing the more strategic, methodical, longer-term board building. The problem is most of us start an organization and board building is an afterthought. We grab the people right around us, family, friends, neighbors, people who are just hanging about. The two problems with that is it's not strategic, and they end up looking just like ourselves, which for a lot of white organizations, that ends up being me looking like people who invite me, right? And it's not necessarily malice or discrimination, but it has the effect of absolutely locking out ideas and diversity and all of the equity that we need to push for in our nonprofit. So definitely encourage folks to do the slower, strategic, more methodical way. And just a note on that, think about strategy. Is the long-term goal to be thought leaders? Is the long-term goal mission attainment? Is the long-term goal reputation? Is the long-term goal like capacity. Like we are going to be the largest organization doing X in the country. In order to do that, I need a board that helps me do that. So your strategy is, what is the North Star? What is the thing you're aiming toward? Is it mission attainment? Then can you build a board that actually helps you solve your mission, that ends cancer or does whatever it is you're trying to do? Or will your board simply be a resource procurement board, a board that helps fund what it is the staff is actually setting out to do? So strategy is really important. Then you go out and build your team.
I 100% agree. That's why we get along so well, because I preach that continuously, and I call it the Bubba theory. When you put your mother, brother, cousin on the board and there's no strategy associated with it whatsoever. You got to look, like you said, your North Star, where are you going? And then you build strategically your board. So my next question is, what are the biggest mistakes that you've seen startups make?
First is not doing research on whether there is even a need for your nonprofit. Of course, we love the issue. We love the idea. It's a very entrepreneurial sector. I have a problem. I'm just going to go do something about it. There's something about just starting a business or starting a nonprofit, and people do that because they get to call the shots, right? It's my idea. I want to go lead this thing. And that's not necessarily ego-driven. I love that entrepreneurial spirit, but you might not have fully researched whether or not, one, someone else is already doing what you're doing, and now you're battling for the very limited pot of resources in your community, or you haven't really thought through whether the public's desire for this solution is the solution you're delivering, right? Because you might think that what you've created is a solution, but it might be in search of a problem. Some folks might not see the world's challenges the same way you do. So if I think that the most important thing the gay community needs is a law that allows us a special dog park for gay people, right? And I just really want a dog park for gay people. And I start surveying after I formed my nonprofit, all my gay friends are like, yeah, there's one down the road that we feel really welcome at. So you don't really need this gay dog park, So I just use that as a cute, funny, silly example of people who do create these very niche things, and they think it'd be really great to have, but they haven't done any market research. If folks feel like, I really need a dog park of our own, so we just do that too often. We don't do the research on whether it's already being done, and we can just partner with another nonprofit. People don't like doing that because then they don't get to be the boss. I'm now a project of something else, and I want to be my own boss. But the next mistake they make is not realizing whether there's money out there to fund this thing. And it's okay to be small. It's okay to stay small forever and just do your small, scrappy little thing. But just know that if you are hoping to grow, which most nonprofits do hope to grow, that you might be limited if you don't do that research.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you around what you said about, I keyed in on a word, and I keyed on the word business, because I think a lot of the mistakes that startups make in the nonprofit world is they don't see themselves as a business. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think for a long time, we have shied away from using business and corporate language in the nonprofit sector, and I totally get it. At the heart of business is making profit. At the heart of nonprofits is impact, not profit. We need profit to make it, but the bigger the organization you get, the more sophisticated I think you get at understanding that this bifurcation of business versus profit versus not for profit is unhelpful. It is a very challenging and unhelpful word to say nonprofit because it's very confusing to people. I literally have had people say to me, how can you work at a nonprofit organization? How can they have money for staff? I thought you weren't supposed to profit. And so it's just an uninformed thing in our sector. We haven't trained people to see for-profit corporations and not for-profit corporations as having this really clear distinction, which is that the benefits, just the resources, the revenue, are not shared among the stakeholders, right? They go back into program, which can be staff. But I do think that I always get lost in my own answer, that I'm forgetting what the actual question was now. I'm like, wait.
No, you're perfect. You're right on track about that mentality of nonprofit not being business.
Yeah, and I think that, so I tend to use the word entrepreneur a lot because we don't think of ourselves as founders or as executive directors as entrepreneurs. But I heard this great definition of entrepreneur once. It was someone who's able to make something out of very little, regardless of what they had to start. right? Like I don't see a limitation on what's ahead. I just see a limitation on what I have right now. But I'm going to make something out of, I feel unencumbered by the fact that I don't have stuff today because I'm going to make something tomorrow. It doesn't have to be a business. A nonprofit can be something really great. So we are entrepreneurial by design. We're doing 10 or 20 or 30 different skill sets in a day. So from the business side, not only is there an entrepreneurial bent to what it is we're doing, we're starting this new business and corporation, but on the other side, we have to think of ourselves as a business because all the same levers are in place. You have to do taxes. You may not have to pay income tax, but you still have to file your taxes. You still have to have revenue coming in, revenue going out, bills, human resources. There's things to do, vendors, there's compliance. There's all these things you have to abide by. We're not just some ragtag group of people meeting in the park. We're like actually trying to solve social problems with really complicated structures in place. So we do need to think of ourselves as a business, but caution that we shouldn't be throwing around businessy language when we're talking with the public because it'll confuse people. But internally, I think we do need to think of it as a business.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I have one more spin-off question that came up from that. And so if you are a founder of a nonprofit and you're dealing with your board who, like you said, we all have a perception about what a nonprofit is. How do you segue? I have a client that I'm working with right now, and master's degree, one staff, not making money, they have missed payroll. How do you have that conversation with the board? What would be your steps in making sure your board as a startup understands that business, that people have to be compensated and paid for what they do?
Yeah, what I would normally tell a board is your first hire is key, and that your first hire is a signal and a symbol of how sophisticated they are in approaching this. Very often, a nonprofit board, if they're still young or new, or they're in that working board phase, what they really want is an administrative assistant, but they hire an executive director. So they hire someone at 10 hours a week or 10 hours a month to basically push papers around, but they call them an executive director. And that leads to all sorts of confusion. It's like, I know you want an ED because you think that's the right first hire, but an ED is a CEO and an executive director is calling the shots. They are executing on the day-to-day implementation of everything. But a lot of these boards don't really want that. What they want is someone to take the workload off of them as a board. So I do tell a lot of boards, make sure if you're going to actually raise the resources to hire and pay someone dedicated to help you, that first hire is, if it's really an administrative role, know that about yourselves. If it's really an executive director and you're committed to letting them jointly lead the organization with the board at an executive level, then the pay has to match. And not only are you going to get better talent, but you're also going to have a better result. So you definitely need to think about that. And for me, it's not about the degrees or what career they left. It's really about, we underpay in this sector.
Yes.
And what you value and the role you give and the money you put behind it is a signal and symbol of like what they actually value.
You do. We are grossly underpaid, and I know we're getting off track, but I have an example of something I want to share. I was in a board meeting when I served in an organization, and one of the board members really was adamant that the nonprofit executive director or CEO could not possibly make more than what they made in their career path. So we have a lot of ways, a lot of growth to happen in that area. So
people carry a lot of garbage and BS and and mindset issues. I literally have been in a coalition just recently where the steering committee of this new entity, one of the steering committee members earns less in their job than the new CEO that we hired. So this person on the steering committee was feeling like, I can't give advice or guidance or even corrective action to the new director because they make a lot more than me, as if that salary signaled expertise or signaled authority. And we had to have a conversation like, no, you're on the steering committee, you're on the board, you're their boss. Actually, you get to have this conversation, right? So there's a lot of mindset stuff we bring to something, or believing that the fundraiser can make more than the executive director. I'm a big believer that the development director should never make more than the executive director. The development director isn't the one losing sleep at night if payroll isn't made, right? The executive director is thinking about 150 different political things going on. So we all have these things, these things that we bring to the organization, these assumptions, and they have to be sort of challenged and thought through.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, hey, if you're just joining us, welcome to our broadcast. We're currently talking about startup help for nonprofits, and we've just covered some fabulous topics, some that was predetermined and some that were not, but we talked about board and the need for being strategic with your board recruitment and your startup board, funding as well. And we also talked about what are some of the biggest mistakes that nonprofit startups make. So as we're getting into this conversation, we might experience some technical difficulty, but Shawn is back. So there was a good moment to experience some technical difficulty if we must. But I do want to remind you guys to please click the heart and the like. And we've been getting some hearts, Shawn, on some of the things that we've been talking about. And let us know where you're tuning in from. And this is going to help us with our Facebook algorithms. I see that we have several people who've joined us. And if I butcher your name, I apologize, but I do like to call out names because you took the time to be here. So Tiziano, Sheely, Radiantly, Tammy, thank y'all. We're getting hearts and likes all over the place. So thank y'all so much for joining us. And so now at this point, what we've talked a lot about, and Mario, thank you, Mario, for being here. We talked a lot about boards, and we talked about fundraising, we talked about mistakes, but what are some other things a startup nonprofit should avoid? What's some of the biggest time suckers is what I want to know.
Get laser focused on what you do and what you don't do. I actually have a tool called the is not chart. It's great for getting alignment wherever everyone's like, oh, what's this new program? What's this new event we're going to do? What's this new person we're going to hire? Whenever you're going to do something new, you can do an is not chart, and you get clarity as a team. Like, what is this thing and what is this thing not, right? So because it's not unheard of for a nonprofit startup to sort of feel like they need to fill every gap out there. Oh, we just created this organization. No one's doing this. Maybe we should do that. Everyone's trying on all sorts of different, like, oh, maybe this will get funding, or maybe this will bring in new people. And the temptation to try on or do all sorts of things that you think no one else is doing can leave you distracted. So get really, really clear on what you do and what you don't do. And I'm a big fan of doing 3 things well instead of 20 things poorly, right? It'll always, always serve your organization better. Now, it's going to be very tempting to say, no, we have to do these 20 things. People are starving and struggling and they're this, that, but you won't ever be as successful at serving the people you care about if you are trying to do all things and be all things to all people. So in those early days, get really clear. We are going to do these 1 to 3 programs, or we're going to serve these 1 to 3 populations, or we're going to have this. Our goal is to pass this one piece of legislation. That's the be all and end all. Whatever it is, just get really, really focused and resist the temptation to get too scatterbrained. That's one of the most important things you can do.
Perfect. And so in the area of sustainability, what do nonprofits need to avoid to ensure sustainability?
Sustainability can mean 2 things. It's retaining your staff, or it's building up the financial resources you need to withstand a shock to the system, right? So like COVID or the financial collapse or something like that. So sustainability in my mind is 2 different things. The first one is, how do you retain the great team you've built? How do you make sure your organization can live well into the future with organizational memory, with organizational infrastructure, with the team that you built, board and staff? And that, in terms of me, I think that a board orientation is really critical. The vast majority of board members say that the single most frustrating thing that they report about board service is that they never got an orientation. They don't know what the culture is like. Am I allowed to ask tough questions during the meeting? I don't really know where these programs came from. So people withhold comments, questions, fears, asking tough questions because they never really got an orientation to tell them what they're walking into. Everyone's like, here's the keys, run this organization.
There you go.
Exactly. We don't give them an orientation. So One thing you can do for sustainability is definitely have that orientation, and then back up board service with support. Staff and other board members, you can have buddies, you can do mentoring sessions, you can fold in training to every board meeting so people learn the different elements of board service. That's one part of sustainability for your human people, your carbon-based human people that you want to hold on to. And then on the money side, in terms of sustainability, I'm someone who loves fundraising. I love moving wealth from where it lives to where it can change lives. And if it's sitting in some rich person or some foundation's bank account, it ain't doing anyone any good. If it's in my bank account, I'm going to go change and save lives. So my philosophy on fundraising is I want to get money to the field and not to some interest earning account. So my goal is if I can get 300,000 or 30,000 or 3 million to the field, there's nothing my staff can't do if I can go get that money. You want professional development? Great. You want better benefits? Great. You want to last here longer because you see a career for yourself here? Great. Anything I want in my nonprofit generally can be achieved by getting more resources in the door. So fundraising, 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 never stop fundraising. And I'll say it again, fundraising, fundraising, fundraising.
And never, but be strategic with your fundraising. I'm going to add that because I absolutely hate to see, and I would love your opinion on this. I absolutely hate to see that nonprofit out there that's doing every month a car wash, and then they're doing a raffle, and then they're doing, just every month is something. What is your viewpoint on that?
It depends on the organization, right? Like I really do believe that if you are a soccer club, that's fine. If you are some local group that's just trying to clean up the park, that might be fine. The larger and bigger nonprofits need to be a lot more strategic and a lot more thoughtful and a little more sophisticated. I use the word sophisticated to not mean like in an arrogant kind of way, but just like thoughtful, strategic, like well thought out sequencing of why you're setting up these particular activities. And so I do believe that in being strategic with your fundraising, it'll be tempting to chase any pot of money that comes your way. But again, like the is not chart, you want to focus on a couple areas of revenue when you're young. So if you don't have an audience yet, if you don't have a list, there's a way to go build that list. But in the meantime, one thing you can do without lists is talk to companies, you can talk to foundations, and you can still do events. You can do events, you can canvas, you can go door to door in your community and build lists that way. There's all sorts of different ways. You can buy lists, rent lists, not advised, but you can do it. You can partner with other nonprofits and like use other people's lists, like constantly partner with other groups that have lists to grow your audience. But there's lots of different things you can do early on to be strategic, but I would say focus on 3 revenue streams. Definitely digital should be one of them, like your website, like receiving donations on your website should be one. People are moving away a little bit from direct mail. So maybe mail isn't, unless you have a robust list, mail might not be the best way. But there's a couple other ways to do it, but you're right. If you're finding that car washes are bringing in quite the haul because there's just something going on in your local community where people are just choosing to come through your car wash, good for you. But it's this scattershot approach of not having a reason why you're doing this. Like, is the car wash actually resulting in not just money, but new leadership development, new volunteer development? Is it a thing you can give your donors to do to get their hands dirty so that they feel like they can participate? If those are the tasks you're doing as a fundraiser, have them be really strategic. Have them be a way to engage the larger community so that your long-term sustainability, you've got all these new people who showed up to wash cars. Great. Next, do you want to join the board? Right. So if you're going to do those things, make them as strategic as possible.
Great. Thank you for that. Very thoughtful, well thought out answer. And so you said a lot as far as this is what you can do, and this is what you can do, and this is what you do. From the person sitting on the other end, who's the founder of that nonprofit or CEO of that nonprofit, how much time do they need to commit to their nonprofit?
It sort of all depends on how pressing the problem is. If you've started a nonprofit just as a book club or as a community garden, you're not going to feel like you need to put 100 hours in. If you started a local nonprofit because there is a fight ahead, like some new pipeline coming through your neighborhood that you want to stop this oil pipeline because it's going to destroy everything, right? You've got a lot of hours ahead of you, right? So depending on the cause, depending on how pressing the public challenge is that you're trying to solve, would determine how many hours you're working on. But having said that, most nonprofits that start having staff, I would say that board members should assume a minimum of 3 to 5 hours a month of board service. Minimum. That's when you're staffed. If you're a working board and you don't even have staff yet, it's probably going to be closer to 5 to 10 hours a month, you know? And if you're like all in, like this is the cause of my life, you know, you're going to be spending more.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so, what are some of the startup best practices that you've seen out there?
Definitely don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just get a website, get out there. You'll improve it over time. It's very tempting to see all of these best practices lists, or this is what you should have. And you should have a website that offers a monthly giving option that then is followed up by an email funnel. It's so easy to think that you're failing or that you're not doing all the best practices because you have low capacity. Don't worry about it. There's always going to be a tweak or an improvement or a thing or a search engine optimization. There's always going to be a thing to make your stuff better, right? Don't let the enemy be the perfect of the good. Just get a basic website out there. The other thing, or just, you know, create a program, be really thoughtful in your program. I'm a big believer in trying to kill as many birds with one stone as you possibly can. How do you achieve multiple things with one set of expenditures or activities? We joke because I'm in the climate movement. You're not supposed to say kill 2 birds with one stone. You feed 2 birds with one stone. I think is adorable. But essentially, if I can develop a program that is attractive to funders, engages new volunteers, builds my power and my capacity, and also sets up the organization to be thought leaders, makes us experts. Like, set up the things you're doing so that they achieve multiple organizational goals. Like, each thing you do is all in service toward the mission attainment.
Right. No mission creep. And mission creep basically is don't get sidetracked. If it's not focused on your mission, then don't do it. I've seen too many people try to adjust to receive that money, or adjust because a board member wants to do this and it just doesn't fit with your mission. So make sure you don't do mission creep, as Shawn said. And so at this time, I'm going to check and see if we have any questions down here for you, Shawn. And one of the things that I know I saw a question come up, need to know much of these, please. I saw some questions come up. So at this time, I'm going to go back. But as you're watching, I want you to make sure that this is the time to get your questions asked, because one of the most common questions I get is, Sabrina, can you help me with fundraising for my nonprofit? And the answer is yes. That is what I do. You can visit my website, but that is also what Shawn does. There's a lot of consultants out here who are willing to help you. You don't have to struggle in this alone if you're a startup. I think that is what's one of the key things that I want to make sure that people know. We are a industry of people, of consultants that really want to help. And so you don't have to struggle alone. And so with that, as you're moderating and you're looking for the question that was there, I cannot find it. So at this point, if no one has any questions, what I would like to do is, Shawn, I would like to for you to let people know how they can get in contact with you. You mentioned that you had some assessment tools that you were going to make available. And so I would like for you to share that information, if you may.
How do I share it in the StreamYard chat? I just sent it, I think, to you, but I don't know how to put it in the comments section. Do you want to drop that tool in?
Yes, I'll drop it in our conversation. I will drop it in before, probably as soon as we get off, I'll drop it in.
Yeah.
And if you could share the information about it, that would be great.
Yeah, perfect. So folks can reach me at, there's an email address that we can drop into the stream, but I'm going to give away 2 free tools today for folks who showed up live. The first one is how to start a nonprofit. It's an actual, a super simple breakdown of the actual mechanical steps of how do you actually create a nonprofit organization. And then the other tool I'm giving away for free for Sabrina's audience today is how to create a unique value proposition for nonprofits. This is something most nonprofits do not do. And I think that you absolutely need to have a unique value proposition. And that is because the way we distinguish ourselves and chart out, here's what we do, here's what we don't do, and here's why it's valuable to the world, is a very important exercise. It was developed by marketers to help sell products, but I think nonprofits could learn a lot from the unique value proposition language and approach to things. So I've created a whole way for nonprofits. I didn't see anything else out there for nonprofits on how to do a UVP, so I created that thing. So those are both free for everyone today, and my email is also included, just so folks can get in touch if they have questions.
Great. And so I'm getting some yays and thank you, Shawn, and all that feedback here. Sorry that you can't see that, but I have a question that I get a lot, Shawn, and I really want to know your opinion on this one, because I have a lot of people in here. I have people in here from Sierra Leone. I have people that are in here from other countries. Are the principles of startup nonprofit different across countries?
I think they're pretty much, I don't have a lot of experience outside the United States, but from people I have worked with all over the world, the bones of it, like 85% of it is the same. You have to raise your own money. You can't just create a nonprofit in any part of the world and money then just comes to you. So everywhere you go, you have to raise your own resources. Pretty much everywhere you're required to have a board. And you should be meeting and having finances and books. So like so much of nonprofits are the same all over the place. In some parts of the world, it's really about how regulated you are. And there might be higher standards for reporting or transparency, but most of the things you learn from nonprofit consultants and professionals apply all over the world. Of course, it's harder in some parts of the world to find foundation support because there may be almost none in that country or infrastructure in that country. And some countries don't even allow Facebook fundraising, or they don't allow all the technology tools that you have, right? So there's challenges in different parts of the world, but the basics are pretty consistent.
People and relationships, boards, and having a strategy. And so I do have two more questions for you. Chambers, I believe Chambers is in Sierra Leone, but I don't think that has an impact on his question. So I'm going to read it and you make the determination. He says, how would we raise funds as a local community-based organization, not a 501c3?
So I actually think one of the benefits of not being incorporated is that you can do anything with the money that you get that you kind of want to, right? You're just counting on people's trust that you're going to use it toward what you said you're going to use it toward, but you can use it for lobbying. You can use it for elections. You can use it for, there's, depending on your country. In general, you've got a lot fewer rules if you just are a band of people bundling their money together to accomplish something, right? So I do believe one of the ways you can raise money, if you don't have if you don't have a tax status that allows you to do that, wherever in the world you are, is one thing. This is harder during COVID, but you can certainly be going door to door. Wherever people are meeting or talking, you can literally go door to door and say, we are trying to stop this pipeline, or we're trying to build this community garden. We're trying to save this park. We're trying to do this thing locally. Will you pitch in? And one of the things I would make sure you have handy is anticipate objections. So be ready for people to say, well, where's my money going to go? And who the heck are you? And how do I know you can be trusted, right? Be prepared to answer questions about what people are going to be susceptible or suspicious of if you don't have tax exempt status. It is that legitimizing thing of being validated by the government that gives people confidence that there's some kind of transparency and compliance being applied. So if you are going to be a scrappy bunch of folks just raising money for a certain cause, I have been parts of those groups in North Carolina and elsewhere. You just try to show transparency. You can create a committee or a team so that people are holding each other accountable. But that's some answers for you.
Yep. And here's our last question here that we can take. Tammy asks, what are some resources or tips on getting grants for nonprofit startups?
Well, definitely, I have some resources on my website on nonprofitfixer.com under the free tools section and my blog, all about how to go get foundation dollars. Sabrina has tons of great resources about how to raise money from foundations. Also, grant writing and funding. Holly Rustick is really good here. Also, Funding for Good, Mandy Pierce. These are both two companies that do a really great job in training people around grant writing. But what you can go do is prospect, and that means make a list. So it's that there's just overwhelming number of foundations out there. Some you can learn about, some that are hidden. right? But there's a lot of money hiding in donor advised funds and foundations out there. So if you're going to go do it, make a list of the most likely prospects, or else you can get overwhelmed by the thousands of foundations that are out there. So make a list. I would start locally in your state. Most funders and foundations fund locally. They are place-based funders. And so definitely make a list. Call your local community foundation. Every major city has a community foundation. Or you can call your Center for Nonprofits. Your state probably has a nonprofit association. Ask them, where do I find a list of funders locally? There are lists of these also on the web that you can go to for sure. And if you message me, I'll point you towards some of those resources. But definitely make a list and then start building relationships with the program officers.
Yep. And I'm going to piggyback on that and make sure that you're grant ready, because there are some things that you need to be aware of and you need to have in place before you're grant ready. And I can share something, a link for that as well. And so with that, guys, we are done. Shawn, give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you so very much for sharing your morning with us today. So I always leave my broadcast with this, and so I want to make sure that I continue in that tradition. So I leave you with this. Your mission matters and deserves to be highlighted in the community. Your mission matters and can be an inspiration to those who need it the most. Your mission matters and deserves to be funded to its fullest capacity. And thank you so very much. And our next Sipping Tea is coming up in June. And we'll have with us Charlene Payton, and she's going to be talking about leadership for nonprofits and what you need to know. And that's Sipping Tea with Sabrina. See you the next time. Y'all be blessed. Bye-bye.